Continuing our discussion about indigenous people in Southern Nevada, and we've talked about the barriers of passing on the culture, the language, the history from, for instance, the elders to the younger members of the tribe. And it's hard. Many things aren't written down, and sometimes the tribal elders are reticent to do some of this, aren't they?
With outsiders, but not with our own people. And these traditions are passed down orally. Mm-hmm. That's why it's important that I said that me and my daughter attend these the elders' nights on Thursdays. And it's not just a language class. Like, we don't just go through, like, this is the color, these are the plants. We're sitting there the first hour and we're having a meal. It's a potluck. Everybody shares something. But we're talking with each other and going over current events and things happening, or family matters or whatever. Funny stuff. A lot of funny stuff, too. But they're talking about the culture, and they're talking about why things are done the way they're done. They're talking about protocols, and those things aren't written down. They're explaining to us what they are, or why we don't do this or we do this at a ceremony. And those are just from being present. We have to be present, and we have to be at the table.
It's understandable that they wouldn't want outsiders, at least to be a part of some of this. But for instance, a historian would come in or something. These things, they're so important and need to be passed down. Mm-hmm. Is there a possibility that there's a way to facilitate something like that where more people could learn about the culture, because it would do everyone a lot of good?
Well, yeah, part of knowing about Native American history is knowing kind of Native-white relations. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, especially when you look at anthropologists, oftentimes what they would do is they would go in and they would write down what they were hearing from Native Americans, and they would use it in exploitive ways. Mm-hmm. And so they would write a book and they would make a name for themselves, and oftentimes they were misinterpreting what they were hearing because they weren't hearing deeply, they were not being respectful. Mm-hmm. But even think about like the Wild West shows. Right. And stuff like that it became entertainment and it became caricature. And so I don't blame Native Americans, indigenous people at all for being very wary of someone that comes in and says, tell me about your culture, because they don't want to be exploited.
And there's a current element to that also. There are some organizations that present themselves as Native American churches who are non-Native. There are people who steal ceremonies and ways of doing things for profit and actually harm other people. So that's the modern context that is actually happening also.
It's a shame. Mm-hmm. You know, we've talked mostly about strategy, policy change, and a little on funding. Let's talk more specifically about funding, okay? What can the state do? What additional financial burden does it take to implement either tribal education, let's say, or broader student education programs in the public schools and higher education?
The place that we can start is by ensuring that we have an accurate student count. If we have an accurate count of how many Native students there are, this solves a lot of problems. Currently, the way that it works, if a student is Native American and Hispanic specifically, if they mark Hispanic, for example, my kids are Hispanic and Native American, but if they're not involved, the families aren't involved with Indian education, if they mark Hispanic, it negates that they're Native, which takes away, they are not receiving the funding that's available to them.
Now, is this a state situation, or is this coming from federal?
It is all mixed up, and that's why we still have the problem, because it's so complicated to get to it.
Sometimes it's a technology issue too. Mm-hmm. Somebody wrote the program in a way that didn't allow for multiple ethnicities or multiple identities. And as anybody that lives in Las Vegas knows, everybody has multiple identities. And so change the software.
Yes. And going back, we mentioned it briefly when we were talking about the Johnson-OMalley Modernization Act. It is passed the House and it's going forward, but it's very important, again, that we support this. We've had such a growth in population here, and if that act is not supported by our legislators here, then we will still only receive funding for our 1995 numbers.
Can you speak specifically as to what is involved in the Johnson-OMalley Act and how it's funded, and just kind of expand on that?
Yeah, Indian Education, the Indian Education Committee, the parent committee, is focused on making sure that the grant money that we receive from the federal government, which comes from trust trust agreements that were made during the time when, we were exchanging land, et cetera.
Right, a long time ago. Yeah.
But these are the two funding sources that come to Native students to ensure that they're receiving the education that they need. It's Title VI, it was Title VII, that was change in name, and Johnson O'Malley. Title VI is geared more toward academic achievement, and Johnson O'Malley is geared toward academic achievement, but also cultural preservation, which is so important for us. Like, I was born and raised in Las Vegas and far away from my tribal community. If students who are so far away, and we hear even our local community, are not connected to our ways and who we are, then, we know all the problems with identity and even achieving success in school that come from that. So.
And just to be clear, the funding is only for indigenous peoples, right?
Yes.
And that's why it's so critical to get an accurate count.
Exactly.
Because that way it can be presented to the legislatures, the Congress, what have you.
Yes.
In a more clear and concise and
extra
important way.
money we get.
Yes,
Extra money.
Extra federal dollars that we get.
comes-
Money that's on the table that we're leaving there.
Trust agreements that were made, it is money. We have so many more students that are involved, that are not involved with our Indian education programming that could be. And again, that goes to funding that could help us support our goals.
The legislature convenes next year, early next year. What are the objectives, and what are you looking forward to? Is there legislation pending right now, or at least do you know of some bills being written that would help?
There's not anything specific, but I do know that there's legislation that's being worked on. It's just not in BDR, bill draft request format yet. But I think more and more what a lot of us are seeing is things need to be aligned with workforce and economic development. And so if we're going to be the new Nevada, if we want our kids to go out into healthcare, into education, into all these new fields that are coming along, it's important to embed Native American studies into the curriculum because it teaches our students to think critically and to think in different ways, to be innovators. Also, when you're looking at the music festivals, we just had Life is Beautiful. Do you know how many indigenous rap bands and punk bands, and they never get invited? Whenever I go anywhere and there's indigenous singers and dancers, tourists just flock to them. They're fascinated with our indigenous people. That to me is just like a huge gaping hole in our tourism strategy. And so when I talk to legislators as the president of the League of Women Voters, I don't ever present any of this as something they need to fund extra. I'm like, these are already things you're doing. You're doing economic development. You're doing workforce development. If you want to actually do that and get a good outcome, talk to these ladies.
They're loving it. They're over there loving it. They'd be high-fiving. How can the viewers out there, they're listening to this, how can they get involved in at least learning the culture, if not contributing and helping?
We have so many resources with the internet, and I had a non-native parent that I do know who reached out to me because they were concerned about some of the activities at their students' school for Native American History Month, wanting to know what is appropriate, what is not appropriate. The resources are there, and one that I want to point out, and it's available on Scholastic. We all know Scholastic books that, for students. On their website, it comes from Oyate, which is in my Lakota language, it means the people, but it brings out ways that you can show respect. The title is Teaching Respect for Native Peoples and Scholastic. If you look that up, that's a really good place to start.
And we will have all of those links on our website.
And they can attend Native American celebrations. We have Native American Heritage Month coming up pretty soon. And on November 3rd, that weekend, the Southern Paiute Veterans Association is hosting their powwow at the Mwapa Paiute Reservation at the Valley of Fire Gateway. And it's just up the street from Las Vegas, and it's open to the public. And it's a weekend celebration. There's food, there's vendors, there's dancing. And that's a good place to start. A fun activity, family friendly, but also at UNLV, Take Back the Night is happening on October 31st. And this event will be going on at the Student Union Pita Plaza Amphitheater from 3 p.m. till 7 p.m. And we're having the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women's March during this time. And we have our Native American Student Association that will be leading the march, as well as the indigenous community at large, to help lift that voice, because there are so many different, I know we're focusing on education, but maybe your viewers can attend that and get an
Sounds
education about more of the issues that are happening in Indian country.
Last question for all three of you, okay? If you could get the eyes, the ears, and the attention of every single lawmaker in the state, and let's say in the nation, what would be first on your wish list? Mercedes? Yeah.
Accurate student count, help us get the funding that's already there, and help us get accurate curriculum into our classrooms and start it from a top-down level so that teachers will feel supported in presenting accurate information.
Sandra?
So what I would like is, when I hear legislators and educators talk about we need student success and students first, that you have to realize that every single student needs personalized attention. And to see Native students and to see our immigrant students and not do kind of cookie cutter policy is what they oftentimes do. And then to me, I look at my Native students and I can see it hurts them because they're not being seen. And so if you want them to be a doctor and engineers and all these things that we absolutely desperately need right now, we have to have them in those pipelines. You need to see them.
Fawn?
Race, class, and gender being mandatory studies, not as an elective at the college level, but also high school. I think it is so important. Of course, I would love American Indian, Indigenous studies taught at the high school level, sure. But if we could have race, class, and gender taught, and that would be a piece of it, because intersectionality is so important. And I think all of our students would be so good if they had that.
And it ties into professional development for educators to have cultural competence training.
Yes.
Yes.
Ladies, thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Very, very informative.